So I'm going to start with Steve because he might seem like the interloper, but I actually think what Little League has done is super valuable, and there's a lesson for every sport. We were talking in the green room about how Little League is actually the modern version of the rec leagues that a lot of us grew up, and that was our first exposure to organized sports. So, Steve, if you could talk a little bit about the tool that you have created with parents, where they can get involved, they have a place to ask questions, get guidelines of what they should be looking for when they're trying to introduce their children to organized sport.
Yeah, we did some market research a number of years ago and realized that as an administrative organization, we were only communicating with our league officials at the community level. And what we found was parents wanted to hear directly from us. They wanted information from us. So we initiated a vehicle called the Parent Connection in Little League Baseball, one that was voluntarily could sign up for it. And we had, in the first year, 1.4 million parents subscribe. And so we now use that as a vehicle to communicate directly with them about the important messages, whether it's basketball or softball or baseball, what parents need to know about a youth sports program. In our case, specifically Little League Baseball. It's been a very effective tool. We've been working with implementing some of the elements from Project Play into the Parent Connection, and what we found is that if you can give parents more information, it really helps them hold the coaches and league officials that run their organizations more accountable for how they operate. So it's been a strong tool for us.
And Greg, I wanted to go to you next because you were talking about how the games that you put on, they deal with all levels of expertise or skill level, and yet it really is the evolution of the rec league in your opinion. Would you talk a little bit more about what these games and tournaments, how you have put them together?
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. It's a great question. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of rec sports in Medfield, Massachusetts, where I grew up. And as a basketball event operator, I really saw a need for a ball-for-all model. And what we did as a company, we made a conscious decision to make it about participation first. We took the professionally operated model, lowered the average tournament entry fee by about $100 to $150 per team to increase participation and to allow, you know, your most developmental fourth grade team and your most elite basketball varsity team to play in the same tournament, both have a great experience, because sport is about collaboration, it's about community, and ultimately it's about positive involvement. So I think we made a huge step to do that, and I will say that the spirit of rec sports that I grew up with is something that I've really tried to implement in my professional career.
It's super important to remember that it's not just about being the best, it's about just taking part. There's so many lessons that you can learn just by being involved with the team. You don't have to be the best to get something out of it, and it seems like that's the lesson that you are trying to impart.
I think absolutely. I think, you know, the one goal that's universal is positive experience, but with that, each player, each team, each coach, each participant has a different goal of what they're trying to get out of every practice, game, tournament, etc. So we want to just make sure we provide a positive environment where there's, you know, great regional, national participation, so that every kid can achieve those goals, whatever they might be, because not everyone's looking for the same thing.
Yep. So many young women, I'm sure, want to grow up to be Shanae, and I just love the story. I was reading up on Shanae and found out that she and her sister, they showed up for their first basketball experience wearing embroidered denim shorts. So we wish we had photos of that.
There are none.
But obviously, your eye was not on the prize of being a pro basketball player on that very first day. Could you just tell us what other sports you played and how you maybe feel those other sports prepared you for basketball?
Sure, and to give you even more context, I was wearing embroidered denim jean shorts, a halter top, glasses holder, not cool kicks. I was wearing, what was it, Keds? Are they Keds? You know, the all white ones? So my parents are Nigerian, and they came to the U.S. for education and ended up building a life. I have 3 sisters, one older who also plays in the WNBA, and then 2 younger who are currently at Rice University from Houston, Texas. And don't worry, family's good. Thank God. Our community's great down in Cypress, Texas. So yeah, my parents, they put us into sports because we're 4 girls, and we basically were tearing up the house. You know how that goes. And education was always first and primary. If you know Nigerians, that's pretty much how African parents roll. And they put us into sports to keep occupying our time. And so we started off with soccer, just because you hear about, well, Africans love soccer. And I remember my first soccer game, I scored like 7 goals. I was like, I'm the best soccer player. I'm going to be the best soccer player in the world. The kids were running away from me because I was a foot taller than everyone. So soccer, I was like, okay, it's not a level playing field. Parents put us in gymnastics, and of course, gymnastics doesn't work because I always tell people, you know, they have the bars that are staggered, and so I'd be on the bar and I'd never be making it over. It's because my bottom would be scraping the ground because I was so tall. So yeah, finally my mom's coworker was like, your girls are tall, you should put them into basketball. And so we went into basketball, and we went just to do, my parents always said, do everything to the best of your ability. Whether it's school, we also play the piano, whether it's basketball, just do it to the best of your ability. So we were horrible, we were wearing jean shorts, we were wearing kids, but we went out there and we played our hardest, and we played just for the fun of camaraderie and teamwork. I also played volleyball when I was in high school. So gymnastics, soccer, volleyball, played multiple sports. And I think the whole goal, like you said, it's all about positive experiences. That's what our parents wanted. We went in with no other aim, and just sprouting into 6'3" helped a little bit later on. But I think that's what we all need to remember, especially now, because technology has changed the game. Kids grow up earlier. And my little sister's experience, my younger sister is 4 years separate. My little sister's experience coming up through AAU and through high school is way different. So many different pressures through technology. Just reminding them as young kids, they don't have to be myself or my sister. They just have to be themselves and play to the best of their ability, and then everything will truly work out.
Yeah, we're going to talk in a little bit about playing for the moment, not for the golden ticket. But so David, I don't want to forget you. You are trying to turn around what is maybe the most unregulated industry in sports, youth basketball. Could you talk a little bit about the youth guidelines that you have implemented and are trying to make second nature to anyone in the sport?
Yeah, I think maybe Steve would back me up that youth sports in general are fragmented and lack structure, and so to say that grassroots basketball is at the top of that heap is really saying something, and there's some reasons for that. We've partnered with USA Basketball on these guidelines, and they didn't establish a youth division until 2013. Our program, the Junior NBA, has a little bit more history, but we really relaunched it in 2015 with a focus on governance and standards. And so just last year, in the spring of 2016, the NBA and USA Basketball came together with the idea of trying to provide some structure for this Wild West atmosphere. And we brought together a number of working groups, and so we brought outside experts. It wasn't just us trying to figure out what the youth basketball landscape needs. And really our first focus area was around health and wellness and creating a positive and healthy experience for young players. We had a group of world-class doctors produce really a framework for how we think basketball should be played to promote, as I said, a healthy experience. And they produced a 30-page document with lots of footnotes and citing medical research that I won't bore you with, but really 3 key points. One, promoting multi-sport participation, and these are all things that I think we'll talk more about, with a guideline that we put out that boys and girls shouldn't specialize in the sport of basketball till age 14 at the earliest. Second area where our guidelines focus is around high-density scheduling, so pretty much the amount of basketball kids are playing. And Greg can speak to this in terms of if you go to an average youth basketball tournament, it may not be uncommon for kids as young as 10 or 12 to be asked to play 2 games a day, 3 games a day, 6 or 7 games over the course of a weekend. And there's a lot of medical research saying that that's not best for health and wellness. And so we provide common sense, age-appropriate guidelines in terms of the amount of basketball kids should be playing. And then the third area is rest and making sure that kids take at least 1 day off per week and extended time off over the course of a calendar year, all in an age-appropriate way. And so hopefully we're beginning to make some progress in terms of implementing these guidelines across youth basketball.
Great. So Sinead brought up the social media aspect of it, and I think it really has changed the landscape in ways both positive and negative. And Steve, you were talking about an example of during the Little League World Series about not all of the social media was positive. Could you please expand on that a little? Because I think it brings up a really important point about what is the end game for kids in sports.
Yeah, if you look at social media during our Little League World Series, what you'll see very often is criticism of our program from one of the blessings and the curses of being an iconic institution is that people think that every all youth baseball being played is Little League baseball, when in fact it's very fractured and there are multiple youth baseball organizations. So what we see often is criticism of our program that we're not real baseball, that it's just rec league baseball, it's just community baseball. It's not, the better players are playing in the travel teams and the elite teams and all those things. And some people get irritated with that, and I don't. I actually tell our people that we should wear that with a badge of honor, because we get caught up in what's the next thing for kids when they're participating, that when they're 9 years old, mom and dad are already thinking about how they're going to get them into college or onto a high school team, and they fail to enjoy and get the benefits of the moment that they're playing in. So that if a rec league can properly identify us, and I'm proud to be called a recreation league, because Little League Baseball, that's what distinguishes it from virtually any other youth baseball organization, many other youth sports, is that we've addressed a lot of these issues. I mean, we have everybody on a Little League team there's mandatory play. You must play in every game in Little League Baseball. We have rules that require a certain amount of rest from pitching and all those things. So the social media part has elevated the argument about which is better. I'll take Little League and the Rec League any day.
I'm going to throw it out to the basketball people on this panel. We had LeVar Ball, and I think we might have the video of it if we can cue it up. LeVar Ball, over the summer, another adult setting an example, whether you think it's positive or not, that's up to you, but he berated a female official thinking that she was not up to snuff, and it was a scene that went viral. It's hard to forget if you see it. Are we able to cue it up?
I get that she's trying to break into the refereeing thing, but just giving texts and calling fouls, that's no way to do it. I know what she's trying to say. I gave him a check, I'm strong. That ain't got nothing to do with it. Just call the game. If you're gonna be qualified, you better be in shape and you better know the game. And she's bad on both of them. She's not in shape, she's not calling the game right, and she don't understand, so now she's trying to make a name for herself, so she's walking around like, you know, I'm the only woman in here. Yeah, we get it. I don't care if you're a woman or a man or whatever, just be good at what you do. Don't try to step in the lane. She needs to stay in the lane because she ain't ready for this. Coach the little kids first and then come up. Because she ain't did enough. She ain't got enough on the resume, I can tell.
Okay, so my simple question in light of that is, how do we keep, is LeVar Ball the future of youth basketball? Or is USA Basketball / the NBA the future of youth basketball? Would each of you like to take that on?
Sure. Well, for my sake, I really hope that USA Basketball and the Junior NBA are the future. I think that they've done a really good job trying to gain influencers in the space, you know, like myself, who has a large event management company and who has a major stake in the game of basketball, working with us collectively to implement these guidelines. And it's something that's going to take a long time to do and a lot of hard work. But I think the future is bright because there's such a need for it to coach the coaches, to to coach the influencers in this game. And I'm very proud to be part of the movement that they're doing because, at least from my opinion, it's very obvious that there's no place for that sort of behavior and ridicule in youth sports in any way, shape, or form.
Because you are modeling for your players that behavior, positive or negative.
That's correct, and that's why, again, I think informing coaches on proper guidelines and how to positively affect the children that they're working with is such a powerful part of this movement. And I really commend, both the Junior NBA and USA Basketball and what they're doing, because these guidelines, one, make a lot of sense, and they're things that you can implement. And ultimately, the biggest part of it is that they're going to make these children have a better playing experience, and that's why we're all here.
So Shanae, LeVar just wants his children to be doing what you're doing, playing professional basketball. Is this the way to go about it?
Definitely not. And so the fact of the matter actually is, and I'm trying to contain myself.
Please don't.
So I was actually in Las Vegas. So I was recently signed to Adidas, my sister and I. I was in Las Vegas for this tournament. And it was an amazing event. It was at level 3, I think at the Cosmo. And the day before I had watched Melo, yes. The day before I had watched Melo play, I was there, watched him coach, saw the scene. I had never in my life witnessed so many kids, so many adults, so many media, so many NBA players come to see the spectacle of LeVar Ball and his children. And while I think, and the credit I will give LeVar Ball, is that he's carving out a space that is so different, whether it's with agency, the shoe market, the infrastructure of sports, the demographic of who runs sports is very different than the demographic who plays sports. And he's carving out this unique space, a huge opportunity. If Lonzo is successful, it's going to be huge because so many kids are going to be modeling after this whole moment that's going on right now. That's the only credit I'll give. The problem we have is modeling. So I was in the gym and it was a fine scene. What I learned was that before that entire game, there were conversations between the ref and even LeVar. Afterward, there were conversations, but what you see is the heat of the moment. And I'm not here to point fingers, but there are so many kids that were looking to him as the standard because of what he's created for his children, that you're now confusing the morals and the principles of basketball and just looping them into one.
Right.
And I always bring it back to social media because a lot of kids take social media as the guideline. These guys rule social media. And that makes our job, Junior NBA, USA Basketball, also Little League, our job within youth sports that much more critical and our voices that much more critical because we have to combat all the negativity that they see and which is trendy and cool and show people that this is not how you do it. You do it by putting in the time. You do it by putting the effort. Yes, they're talented individuals. Yes, their dad is doing something great within the sense of reconfiguring, rechanging this whole infrastructure within sports. But you have to see it through that lens. And the only way you see it through that lens is through education. If I was a young kid, I wouldn't know what he was doing besides making his kids shoes and looking cool while doing it, and yelling at a female is just a side product. Since I graduated Stanford, I look at it as, what are you doing to these children? Right. Are you creating a path that is going to be helpful to the kids that don't make it?
Right.
Your sons are the ones that are privileged to make it. And the reality is that most people don't. And I'm just fortunate to be a pro athlete. We have to plan and prepare because injuries happen. Life plans, paths change. You have to prepare for not, because education is what lasts forever, and basketball is sort of a departure. People tend to think that basketball or soccer or football or any sport is the path, the ticket, what we're talking about, the golden ticket. Sure. But it's not. It's education and seeing the world through a better eyes. So we have a lot of work to do, but the good thing is that we have frameworks that we believe in, and we have also many channels, vehicles through technology to combat those negative things that young kids see and try to reshape. At Stanford, I was trying to make nerd cool. Nerd is something, redefine nerd. And we sort of did. We have to do the same thing to basketball, hoops culture, women's hoops culture, girls basketball. We have to redefine our own narratives so that kids understand that, hey, this is not the end all be all. You don't have to bring down a woman to make yourself higher. No, if you bring the woman up, everyone's going to be at a better place, right?
And the problem with
Well said.
The problem with the LeVar Ball is we really won't know. It will be 10, 20, 30 years before we know whether he really was ultimately successful. If Lonzo blows out his knee in training camp, and his career, God forbid, is over, is he going to have the life skills to reinvent himself? David, I was wondering if you cringe a little when you watch that video, given what you are trying to instill.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Shanae said was excellent and so on point. Where my head goes is that ultimately it's not going to be about LeVar. It's going to be about Lonzo and those other kids and what Lonzo, can do in Los Angeles or wherever his pro career takes him. I mean, I was telling these guys we've had a chance to do a couple events with Lonzo since he declared for the draft in the past couple of months. And he's a delightful kid. He was awesome with the kids. Selfies, autographs, teaching them the drills. And so, LeVar clearly, as Janae said, has figured something out and been able to get a lot of attention for himself. But ultimately, particularly as the NBA season gets started, I think we'll see more of the attention and focus going to Lonzo and what he's able to do.
Shanae, there was a study done of collegiate athletes. So these are people, the 1%, who have gone from playing youth sports to actually playing in college. So it's a very small subset to begin with. And these researchers found that of all the sports, female basketball players were the most dissatisfied with their high school experience, that they wish they had been able to play more sports and have a more normal existence. You, as someone who seems to have had what these other young women are pining for, what do you make of it? How do you explain it?
Well, it's interesting when you were listing the guidelines. So I'm on the Junior NBA Leadership Council, and I've been in those meetings, and it's really exciting. And when you just reminded me of those guidelines about one mandated rest day, certain amount of running you should do, I was like, man, I wish we had those guidelines when I was growing up, because I was running some sprints. But I would say that definitely the reason why women's basketball players, it's just a difficult situation to be in. I was very fortunate, my older sister was very fortunate to have had amazing experiences, and we were at Stanford, and a lot of times people would say, oh, Stanford, it's amazing and it's great, yes, but sometimes you don't get to stop and smell the roses when you're there. And in our locker room, I've seen, unfortunately, people deal with, mental health issues, physical health issues, just stress as females, because we are trying to plan for our future. And when you're a basketball player, like even right now, I'm 25 years old and I'm planning for my future. I'm like, I want to have family, but I want to keep hooping. And then, you think about graduate school, there's a lot of pressures outside of your daily pressures. And I think the number one issue, and this goes outside of women's basketball, it's collegiate athletics in general, because I do a lot of conversations with the NCAA as well. It's we want to feel like we're in control of our bodies. And when there are no regulations or there's sometimes exploitation of how long you can be in practice, if you can manipulate, okay, you're going to be on the court for 3 hours, and after 3 hours, well, then you can be in the weight room, and then after that, you have to be at a certain place. For 6 to 7 hours of your day is devoted to this one sport. Where are you going to fit in student life, tutoring, being a normal human being, being able to feel like, oh, I know, I'm sorry. Yeah, like it's hard to fit all of that into the collegiate experience.
People from the student body
exactly.
who are non-athletes.
I remember I would be biking to practice, and we had a great experience at Stanford, but it's like there's no university that does not have this experience. I'd bike and I'd see kids sunbathing. I'm like, man, must be nice. Book out. I was like, dang, I wish I had that life. But things changed for me when I decided to be I chose international relations as my major. And my advisor, prominent person, U.S. government at the time, and she told me, Shanae, you don't have to sacrifice athletics for academics or academics for athletics. Well, everyone knows, this is Dr. Condoleezza Rice. She's huge into sports. She loves Stanford. And she told me that, and the light bulb switched. I was like, okay, because for so long we've been conditioned, especially female basketball players, that you have to give everything to basketball so that you can reach the WNBA, and we're fortunate to have 21 years of our league. You have to give it all, and then whatever you have left, give it to academics. So, there's a phrase, C's get degrees, right? So people sometimes would settle for C's, and at Stanford, you're like, oh, C at Stanford, we good. But no, it's really A's and B's get degrees. And I thought that for so long that I could only use whatever was left for my academics. I shifted gears. I was like, I'm going to give my all. And if I have to miss a practice, I'm going to go to Coach Taro. What's she going to say? Shanae, I need to go to class. Coach, I need to go to class. She's going to say, no, don't go to class? No. And we're at the point, and it's unfortunate, where a lot of student athletes are calling out their coaches. That's not healthy. That's not healthy at all. But certain coaches and individuals and institutions now, I think, have been put into check to realize that, hey, if these kids are saying they need to go to class, shoot, they could be recording it. They could use that to your athletic department head and say, hey, this person is not letting me go. I mean, we're bold. Millennials are bold. But at the same time, we have to understand that we have to put forth both efforts. It's when we tend to try to get most for our experience instead of not realizing that the institution is here to help us.
Right.
That's where we get in trouble.
So academics is clearly the important piece here, but it's the piece that often is overlooked. And it really is the golden ticket. Sports is not the golden ticket. How do you guys convey that from the youth level, ingrain that early? Because I come in contact with far too many parents who see sports as the ticket out, and really education is. How do we change that thinking?
Well, I think you have to really focus on the overall experience. Number one, that sports is an experience, education is a part of it, and having kids have a more holistic life growing up, that you're not just focused on one thing, that everything's the most important thing. You know, your sports career starts the moment you pick up a ball or kick a ball, I guess, you know, whatever it might be, and it finishes whenever you stop, that it's an overall experience throughout life, and education is continuous too, that the two of them have to come together to enhance each other, and until we stop promoting that, it's, you know, there's no chance for us to make the progress that we need to do. And I hope that more groups like the ones on this panel continue to celebrate it and take it in a positive light, so that kids see it all come together, you know, for the better for all of them.
Yeah, a couple of comments from my perspective. One is our program, basically we say with two goals: teach fundamental skills of the sport and teach life skills. And so I think it's that life skills component, which we do through a number of different programs, whether it's focused on sportsmanship, whether it's focused on respect and how different communities come together. We really want to make sure that part comes through as much as the basketball part. The other thing, which I don't want to let Chiney's comment pass without mentioning, because we're talking about the future of basketball, like how awesome is it that girls have role models like Chiney to look up to? And we're extremely fortunate. If we talk about where we are as a sport, there aren't other sports. I mean, there are softball players, but they don't have a platform like Chiney does. And for us to have a league like the WNBA, playoffs are starting tonight, so everyone make sure you tune in.
Yes.
For us to have a league like the WNBA and role models like Chiney, I think is just critical to where we can go, particularly as we look at girls.
And Steve, could you talk about the all-academic summer camp? Didn't you have that, or is that
That's
was
Greg.
Greg? Okay, please just how does that work? And it seems like it's a huge carrot.
Sure, yeah. I mean, 11 years ago, I saw a huge kind of need in the marketplace for high-achieving student athletes to have a platform to showcase their talent. So it's not just about the most talented athletes, but the most talented student athletes. And we started with about 74 kids from around the country, and now have about 400 kids and 150 colleges from all over the country to come and recruit these high academic kids with above a 3.2 out of 4.0 GPA. And this is, you know, Division I, Division II, and Division III. So it really embodies the true essence of the student athlete, that it's not just about scholarship, but about education and about experience. And camp's been a great experience, and about 80% of our kids go on to play college basketball, and that ranges everything. We've actually had kids go from Stanford to, you know, some of the best Division III schools, non-scholarship in the country. And in my professional career, it's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Great. Steve, do you have anything to add to the academic?
We don't have any academic component to Little League Baseball. We're really a spring-summer recreation program, which I'm proud to say. But I would tell you, David, that LeVar Ball, if he was in our program, would have been suspended for 2 games, because we have a social media policy that we implemented in Little League Baseball and have enforced it over the past summer. So my point is, I think we need to take those kind of things seriously. Yeah. And regardless of what he's saying or what he was abusing a female referee.
Right.
And he would have paid a price for that in our program and would have been suspended. So I don't know if if the AAU or whoever was the governing body of that particular tournament would have had that authority, but we would have in our program, and I would encourage more social responsibility in those areas too.
Great, and I think with that, we'll open it to questions.
So the first question is, how can the NBA teams leverage their community influence to positively impact youth basketball? Which teams are doing so?
I'll take that one. Was that from an NBA team? No, I mean, there's no question. I talked about the platform that the WNBA and their players have. The NBA, absolutely the same thing, and particularly as it relates to social responsibility, Steve. I mean, there are a number of issues that have been embraced. One is, I talked before about bringing communities together, and particularly, over the last few years, bringing law enforcement together with communities of color. And so we, at the league level, launched a program, Saturday Morning Hoops, which basically partnered with local community centers. We've done in a few markets where we bring a group of kids into the community center on successive Saturdays for both a classroom-based activity and 3-on-3 basketball. And it's law enforcement and kids in that community participating together, creating these bonds and creating these, and there's no better way to do it than playing basketball together. And a number of teams have picked that up and are running similar programs, really bringing their community together in a unique way.
And to even take that further, because I've heard so many great things about it, there were even focus groups in those Saturday morning hoops where kids of color would sit with the police officer, and the police officer would literally say, "You can ask me anything, and I'm not leaving." And they'd sit, and all of a sudden, spitfire questions, and it just broke down so many barriers. I mean, in the WNBA, we were like, we need to do this too. So it's not just a facade, it is real. Kids had opportunities to engage with law enforcement and break down those barriers. And that's why I say sports is universal and it's a unifier. Sports, and I always say athletes tend to be at the forefront of change because we tend to be bold enough to say what we're thinking, and then society tends to come after. You saw Carmelo, LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Paul on stage at the ESPYs. Next thing you know, this program happens. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm glad you brought that to fruition because it was huge.
Very good.
Our next question is, what role should Nike, Under Armour, and Adidas play in improving youth basketball?
I'll start by giving them some credit. They've all endorsed youth guidelines that I talked about, which I think is a really important statement. And working with those, and we're partners with all three, they are in line in terms of wanting to make sure the game is played in a way that promotes health and wellness. And to get those three companies on board, they don't often agree on all that much, I think was important and makes a big statement.
And on behalf of Adidas, I can tell you when that situation happened with LeVar, I was in the breakout room with all of their high officials, and they were freaking out. So I think they understand that there's a concern with youth basketball and that anything that touches that certain family tends to be amplified. So while you may not see regulations happening in public, they're definitely happening behind closed doors. And I think at the end of the day, like they had a whole court where they brought kids from all brands to come and experience NBA players and to learn, to watch them work out, pick their minds. I think we're moving in the right direction. There's accountability that's being had, but obviously situations that were like that don't tend to show the full picture.
Greg, you want to finish?
Yeah, no, I think you have three brands that are the ultimate influencers in sports and especially basketball. So there's a huge need for them to do the right thing, and I think for them to adapt these guidelines is a big step moving forward, and it's one of many steps that needs to occur. And I applaud them for making the initial steps, all three brands, but it's really going to come from what they do over time and the influence they make in the youth sports community and the positive things they do, not just what they say. So I think there's a big first step, but a lot more work needs to be done to make this right.
I do worry about the 10-year-olds being pursued by apparel companies. That feels like that's the wrong message. That's the golden ticket and not the in the moment, enjoying the experience.
There's no question about that.
Thank you very much.